there's a lot of companies who make great $40,000 cars. So how do you differentiate yourself? And the same's true in the bike business. There's a lot of people who make great road bikes and they make great mountain bikes. And so how are you going to differentiate yourself? And I think one of the ways that we can differentiate ourselves is by providing incredible hospitality to our customers. And, one of the things we do as a company is, if you buy a Trek, you're part of the Trek family and we're going to take care of you.
Prominent CEOs, leading economists, iconic investors, insights from the experts. The Walker Webcast with Willy Walker. See who's next.
Thank you, Susan, and good afternoon, everybody. It's a real pleasure to have John Burke join me today on the Walker Webcast. Let me dive into a quick intro first, John, and then we'll dive into our discussion. John Burke has worn a lot of hats at Trek Bicycle since his first job packing parts when he was in high school. He's been the president of the company since 1997. He's the author of 3 books: Presidential Playbook 2020, 12 Simple Solutions to Save America, and One Last Great Thing, a memoir about his father, the founder of Trek. He and his wife, Tanya, the CEO of Trek Travel, live in Madison, Wisconsin. So John, as I did my research for the webcast today, I realized that there are a lot of similarities between the two of us. We both grew up around family businesses. You went to undergrad in Boston. I went to business school in Boston. We both run the New York Marathon, the Boston Marathon. We've both done triathlons. You've done an Ironman. I have not done an Ironman. We've both done the Atopta Tour plenty of times. We are both extremely focused on culture at our companies, and have both created businesses that are ranked by Great Places to Work Institute as a great place to work many, many years. But then that's where the similarity ends, because what you do is so cool. And what I do, I love my business, but it's not nearly as cool as building bikes. And as one of your Tour de France riders said, he's now riding on a rocket ship. And so you build these beautiful, sleek, technologically innovated rocket ships. But I want to start here, John. On December 19th, 2017, you received an email from a rider in Northern California named Joe Shami. And Joe Shami, he had purchased a Trek Project One in 2003 and had ridden his prized Trek bike up Mount Diablo for 496 consecutive weeks. And he was 83 years old when he wrote you that email. Can you carry on the Joe story to the end? Because I think it says so much about you as a leader, about your company, and about Trek.
Oh, you're going to make me cry at the start. Joe sent me that email and I thought, wow, here's a guy, he's, 83 years old. He's been up Mount Diablo 500 consecutive weeks. Every week he rode up that mountain. And, some of the times it was closed and Joe still figured out a way to get up to the top. And he was an incredible cyclist. He had his Project One bike and he had, 90-some thousand miles on it. And he sent me that email. And I thought, what a great story. So I sent Joe an email back and I said, Joe, when you make it to 100,000 miles, your next trek is on me. I just thought it was an incredible accomplishment. And so over the next few years, Joe and I would email back and forth, and we were kind of pen pals. And Joe is coming up on his 100,000 miles. I think he was, I was going to go up there and I was going to ride up Mount Diablo with him for that ride that would put him at 100,000 miles. And I got a phone call one morning from Joe's friend that Joe had been hit by a car in a roundabout and had lost his life. And I'll never forget that phone call. That was a sad day for me. And Joe had a friend, Colonel Al. And Joe and Colonel Al had figured out how to make cycling safe going up Mount Diablo. And so they had a ride there, Mount Diablo, and they dedicated it to Joe. And I showed up for the ride, and we rode up that mountain. And I've been in touch with Colonel Al, and Colonel Al achieved Joe's dream. They have these things called ways that you can pass going up Mount Diablo. Cars can safely pass you, turnoffs, and they got it done. And in fact, I gave Al an award. I gave him one of the first Oberstar Awards for excellence in bicycle advocacy about a month ago in Austin. So that's a long story about Joe, but he was an amazing guy.
Yeah, but I read that anecdote that you wrote on your website, and it just, I think, speaks volumes about the connectivity to you, the ability for people to just write an email to the CEO of Trek and get you to respond, engage. And then with someone like him who had done such an incredible feat of going up Mount Diablo every single day, and to have that connection to you of going and doing that ride with him, I'm sure it probably pushed him up there many times between that time he first started engaging with you, John, and when he actually unfortunately got killed. Let me back up a little bit, because one of the things I find to be really interesting is you got out of college. And by the way, I see that BU is back in the Frozen Four for the first time in a while. And so congratulations to BU on making it to the NCAA Final Four in hockey, a place they've been a perennial powerhouse. But you got out of BU and you went to work for Trek, and you were running the Rocky Mountain region, and really got a sense of meeting with dealers and understanding the bike products. And you've talked, as I've listened to you, about this great customer focus, and that the customer focus is really what's differentiated Trek from the very beginning. And as you and I both know, it's one thing, every CEO and every company likes to talk about a customer focus, but there's a big difference between talking about customer focus and having a customer focused company. And as you think about product innovation and design and costs and supply chains and all that, how do you keep Trek customer focused?
Oh, wow. That's a great question. One of the things, when I started with Trek in May of 1984, Trek was kind of at its peak. It started in 1976. My father started it, and I joined the company, and I was a road rep. And I had like 10 states, and I drive my little Chevy Cavalier station wagon from small retailer to another small retailer. And it was at a time that Trek really started to crumble. And my father was the money behind Trek, but he didn't run the day-to-day business. And the people who ran it really didn't like the customers, and the customers didn't like them. And I sat there and I watched the family business crumble in front of my eyes. And there was no greater education that anyone could ever have. So that's kind of how I got into caring about the customer. Is I saw what the opposite was. And then my father basically fired the top managers at Trek. And I think I was 24 years old, and he brought me in to be the head of customer service. And so now I could do everything I wanted to do. And my father grew up in the appliance distribution business, and he understood that dealers made the difference, and that you really needed to take care of the customer. And I really learned that from him, but then I saw it through my own eyes, and I made the decision that we were going to be the home of the happy customer. And from an early point on, that was one of my guiding principles, is we're always going to take care of the customer. Before we do anything else, we're taking care of the customer. And I think one of the things, there's this funny story about, we were rewriting the owner's manual, and somebody comes in to see me. The legal department's there, and they go, "We're coming up with a new owner's manual." And I'm like, "Oh, that's great. Let me see it." I start paging through it, and it's all this legalese to protect Trek. And I go, "This isn't an owner's manual. This is a legal manual." And they go, "Yeah, but we have to do it because of this, 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 and this." And I go, "Okay." I go, "Can I have the first page?" They said, "Sure." And so my first page was, "Dear customer, thanks for buying a Trek. Welcome to the Trek family. If you ever have a problem with your Trek, see your Trek retailer. If they can't help you, call Trek. Here's the number, and we'll take care of you. And if you still aren't being taken care of, here's my email and I will take care of you. And to this day, I can tell you when the bike season starts, because, I get a bunch of emails, but people see that in the organization, and, we focus on the customer, and, some companies do and others don't, but it's something that's worked for us.
So in your mission statement, John, there are a couple things that I find to be interesting. First of all, it's we build only products we love.
Yeah.
So there are not many companies that only build products that they love.
Yep.
Then we provide incredible hospitality to our customers. So for a second, talk about that, because as I'm assuming that there was a tremendous amount of work to pick that term hospitality, because most people talk about we provide great customer service, and you're not in the hospitality industry. I'm in a hotel in Miami right now that is very clearly in the hospitality industry. But you purposely chose, we provide incredible hospitality to our customers. Talk about that for a second.
Well, I love the car business, and I think the bike business is the poor man's car business. And, there's a lot of people who make great $40,000 cars. There's a lot of companies who make great $40,000 cars. So how do you differentiate yourself? And the same's true in the bike business. There's a lot of people who make great road bikes and they make great mountain bikes. And so how are you going to differentiate yourself? And I think one of the ways that we can differentiate ourselves is by providing incredible hospitality to our customers. And, one of the things we do as a company is, if you buy a Trek, you're part of the Trek family, and we're going to take care of you. And whether it's me answering your email, whether it's our retailers taking care of you, we're there to take care of people. Trek has a net promoter score. We take a look at our net promoter score every day. Trek has a net promoter score of 93. I mean, find a company that has a net promoter score of 93. I mean, that's a high mark. And we keep, and we've got higher goals. We're going to push that number higher because we're going to continue to deliver more value and a better experience for our customers going forward.
So you have an incredible corporate culture, and you have fantastic employees as well. You have an ESOP, you have a profit sharing program, you've got mountain bike trails around your headquarters. One of the things that I thought was really interesting in one of the ethos is, I'm not sure what the ethos is at Trek, is bring energy to every meeting. And I thought it was such an interesting thing as it relates to saying to your counterparts at Trek, when we've got a meeting, bring in energy every single day.
I also think when people show up, they're either bringing energy or they're sucking it out of the room. There's no sitting on the sidelines. You're doing one of two, and I would much rather have you bring energy. And we play in a competitive industry, and we need our best team on the field, and we need people bringing energy every day.
So your dad, who started the firm, was a great athlete, and he was a runner. He got turned on to running by Frank Shorter and the whole running wave of the 1970s, then became a cyclist, and was fit as a fiddle when he tragically died after a heart valve replacement when he was 73 years old. And as you think back, John, on the transition of a family business from your dad to you, I've heard you say that when your father died, the culture at Trek didn't change because he'd done a great job of giving you the rope to lead the company, and you've been leading it for quite some time when your father died. But in the transition from your dad to you, and I've gone through this myself and have some, scar tissue, if you will, from the transition from my dad to me, were there any footfalls that you made as it relates to stepping into the leadership role and assuming control of Trek that you look back on and say, I could have done a little bit better with my dad on this or that?
It's a really good question. I always say that I play for a batting average. I mean, I'm not going to get all of them right. And, we've done some amazing things here, and we've made some mistakes along the way. I think he would be, somebody told me before he died that that his body would die, but that his spirit would live on. And he's here every day. I mean, there's not a day that goes by that I don't talk to him. He and I have some great conversations, and any big issue that comes up at Trek, there's not a big issue that comes up that I don't think about what would the big guy do. And I kind of run it that way. But there's nothing that really sticks out that I would go, that was a big error that he would not be happy with.
Sounds like the two of you had an amazing relationship and partnership. You mentioned, John, when you joined the firm, that it was kind of at the height at that time. And I believe, as I heard you say, it was about a $20 million revenue company at the time. It stepped back to being about a $14 million revenue company, and now is north of $1 billion. And I think from the rankings, as it relates to largest bike manufacturers in the world, you're number 3 behind Giant and Specialized. Am I correct on that?
Probably not.
Okay, probably not. Only because there's some brands that we don't know. Are those the 3 consumer brands that might be the biggest, or is that am I grasping for something by saying that?
I think we're bigger than one of those 2, and
Okay.
That's not how we really keep score.
I got it. Okay. But so on that, you talked previously about the brand and the building of the brand and how you compete. I believe Lance Armstrong's first Tour de France win was on a Trek bike, and many of his wins were on Trek biking. And you have a long history of sponsoring professional racing, and I think are the only brand that actually sponsors one of the teams now, which I find to be interesting. What about, just as an aside, what about the fact that countries are starting to sponsor teams? I mean, there's an Israeli team. There are a couple of don't they have unlimited budgets? Isn't it like how hard is it going to be for private teams like yours to compete with these nationally owned teams?
I don't know. I really don't know the backstory there. But if you take a look at who are the those are well-financed teams, but there are other teams that are really well-financed. So it's hard for me to say.
But I mean, to talking about well-financed teams, I think there are 68 support staff of coaches and trainers and logistics behind your team, the Trek Sigfredo team. That's a significant investment. Yet Trek has always been there as a differentiator, if you will, as it relates to the pro circuit and being one of the few brands that really is associated with it. Obviously, you believe that that's been a great return on investment.
Well, if we're the only bike company that owns a team, and we sponsor teams for a long time, and we get a lot of feedback from riders make products better, and by having the riders as your employees, as part of the family, we get feedback right out of the gate. We have a much closer relationship, and it's just worked better for us. And one of the things I'm most proud of is we've owned the men's team, I don't know, for maybe 10 or 12 years. But 4 or 5 years ago, we saw what was going on in women's cycling, which really wasn't, it was really kind of a tragedy. And we stepped in and said, we're going to do the same thing for women as we're doing for the men. And, Trek's had a huge impact on women's cycling, and the team that we have is just awesome. And, racing's been a big part of Trek in the past, and it'll be a big part of Trek in the future.
So I know you have you started, it may not still be called it, but you have an advanced concept group that you started in 98 before Lance won that. What kind of people join that? I mean, do you have metallurgists who join it? Do you have physicists? Do you have component specialists? Who comes to work in your advanced concept group, John?
Some really smart people who know a lot more than I do. You've got people from great universities. You've got, people from great engineering companies. You have NASA alumni. There have been just some incredible people who work here at the bike company in the past and in the present. I mean, we've never had a better team on the field than we have now. And the stuff that we're working on now is amazing. I mean, we've come out with a lot of really great products in the last few years. And, our product pipeline is really full going into the future. So I feel great about the team, and I feel really good about what we're up to.
As you think about it, as it relates to how you compete in today's world, what's the most important? There's not one thing. It's not componentry. It's not the wheels. It's not the frame. It's not the frame weight, what have you. But as I ask that question, there's a little bit there where you have to sort of, I'm assuming from a strategic standpoint, say, if we're going all in on one piece of what makes a fast bike, makes a great bike, is it more in the frame materials? Is it more in obviously the componentry comes from Shimano or from SRAM, and SRAM is your partner as it relates to your Tour de France team. But if you will, as you think about the future, and I want to get to e-bikes in a moment, I'm talking about just, human propelled bikes right now and racing specifically. What's the next frontier, if you will?
No, I think, it's really interesting. If you take a look at a bike, everything can be improved. And, you might say, well, the biggest thing is materials. And yeah, that's true. There's a lot going on the material side. And then there's a lot that's going on in the design side. If you take a look at the new Madone that just came out, that's a super interesting frame design. If you take a look at the aerodynamics of that, it's pretty amazing. And then you take a look, wheels are a really important part of the bike. They're an important part of, how fast that bike goes. And the aerodynamics, there's a lot going on there. There's a lot that goes on with components. There's a lot that's happening with electronics and integration. So, if you go back and take a look at, that bike that Lance won the Tour on in 1999, and fast forward 24 years, if you look year by year, it looks like incremental innovation. If you take a look at it over a 20-year period, you would go, that's unbelievable. And we'll continue to move forward here.
And on that, how much vertical integration do you think about, in the sense that you just talked about varying pieces? Wheels, obviously, there are plenty of wheel manufacturers that are at the cutting edge of wheel manufacturing. I mentioned the two big component manufacturers. I'm assuming, given your size and scale, there have been lots of thoughts as it relates to, if you will, more vertically integrating into the manufacturing of the entire bike from wheel to wheel, if you will. How difficult is that? Because on the component side, for instance, SRAM and Shimano seem to have a duopoly, correct?
Yeah. And, those are some great companies, and they make some incredible products. And, if you take a look, we just go back to that mission statement, only awesome products we love. And, what you can buy from SRAM and what you can buy from Shimano today, they're really good at what they do. And there's a lot of ways that Trek can work with those suppliers and then bring about all the innovation that we can bring about and make some incredible products. So I think, we always look for ways where we can differentiate and where we can bring value to the rider and where we can really improve the product. And sometimes that's, we'll look at certain pieces that we can vertically integrate, but, you got to have great partners, and we like working with SRAM. We really like working with Shimano.
And during the pandemic, when all outdoor activities had a huge boom, I'm assuming supply chain and supply chain management became a huge issue for Trek. Talk about that for a second.
Oh,
I know you could spend
that's a whole book, like 6 volumes. Unbelievable time. I think the world shut down on March 12th, somewhere around there in 2020. And we were putting together projections in here of sales being down 60% for the year. It was going to be misery. And, it's like the first days of April, somebody walks into a meeting, and we're going through, all the contingency plans. And somebody's like, I was on the phone with this dealer in Florida, and they had lines around their store. And I'm like, you're kidding me. And, it started out, and then 2 weeks later, there was like a global bike boom. It was unbelievable. So, it really stretched our supply chain, and we have some great systems here, and we do a really good job on the IT side, and we have some amazing people working for Trek on supply chain, and we like to refer to those years as our best, worst years ever. It was brutal. But, we made it through. We did a lot of business, and we learned a lot of lessons.
Do you manufacture your frames in the States or abroad?
We manufacture frames abroad, and we assemble bikes in Asia. We assemble a lot of bikes in Europe, and we assemble really high-end bikes in the US. It's a global company.
Yeah. And the direct-to-consumer model, John, the Canyons of this world who've come out and basically tried to, go around the distribution network and the local dealers. It's very evident from your comments so far in this discussion that dealers are super important to Trek, and you treat them like your real partners. How much are you D2C versus through the dealer network, and how does someone like a Canyon or others that are trying to do a pure direct-to-consumer model present a competitive threat?
Yeah, I think, that's something the consumer is going to decide. And you can get online today and you can buy a Trek online and have it delivered to a dealer, and let the dealer assemble it. I would not buy a bike online. That's me personally. A bike is a technical piece of equipment that really needs to be assembled properly. And I think retailers add, a really good amount of value there. If you're a super technical person, you can assemble that bike. There's so many different ways retailers add value right now. And I think retailers have adapted to the market. And it's all about, can retailers provide value to customers? And if they can, then it makes sense for customers to buy bikes at retailers. And if they can't, it won't. But, we have great relationships with retailers, and we think they do a really good job for customers.
And has the number of retailers expanded since the pandemic, or have some gone away? I mean, was the pandemic, I'm assuming it was a real challenge for you from a supply chain manufacturing standpoint. It was also a big challenge for the actual retailers as it relates to just meeting clients' needs, saying, hey, I don't have any inventory. And then also going from with no sales because they didn't have the product to sell. Many of them just turned into service centers. And while that may be a place to make some money, my understanding from the retail standpoint is they really make money when they actually sell a bike. And so have you seen a growth in the retail network, or have you seen a shrinking of the retail network?
I think it's been pretty stable. But retailers had a good bike boom. At least Trek retailers had a good bike boom. And you're in a different, those days are over. You're in a different situation now. There's plenty of inventory in the market, and now the game's kind of changing. And for sure, retailers, I say this all the time to the retailers, but retailers are going to have to run better businesses, and retailers need to continue to focus on taking care of customers and how they can deliver value to customers if they want to survive.
And we've been talking mostly about human propelled bikes up until now. Can we go to e-bikes for a second? Because I think that's a exciting growth opportunity. And more than potentially on the manufacturing side, potentially even more for Trek Travel, which is the business that your wife runs. Because I mean, I went on a trip a couple of years ago where it was a bike trip with my family, and we invited my parents to come on the trip with us because for the first time ever, my parents could get on an e-bike and do the routes with us, which made for an incredible family experience. Talk for a moment about how much of a growth opportunity there is in the e-bike category, and then also into Trek Travel.
Okay, so e-bikes can change your life, and I'll hold up a product that changed your life. That And I'll still remember the first time somebody showed me an iPhone and they're like, look, you can take a picture and then send it. And you're like, wow, like this is amazing. And everybody has a huge smile the first time they use an iPhone. And the only product I've seen do that since is an e-bike. Whenever anybody gets on an e-bike, they just have this huge, incredible smile. Everybody, 100%. And, you know, it takes the hills away. You can keep up with your partner. You can, you know, the best places to ride a bike are up hills or up mountains, and you can go wherever you want. It's absolutely amazing. And people are discovering this all over the world. And, you know, we've got an incredible lineup of e-bikes, and I've seen it firsthand with friends, with people at Trek, with Trek Travel customers. E-bikes change lives. It's that simple. And, you know, your point of going on a bicycle trip, and I would recommend to everybody who's watching this incredible podcast, check out Trek Travel, because if you want a vacation of a lifetime, you can go on a Trek Travel trip and you can see the world, and you can definitely do it with your spouse. You can do it with your family, and you can go on a regular bike or you can get an e-bike. And e-bikes, just like you and your family, it can provide an incredible vacation for anyone. I've seen it happen. I've seen it happen with so many people, and it's not like, you know, 70% of people, it's 100% of people smile. It changes the lives of everybody who gets on an e-bike.
Yeah, I have to say, without a doubt. The technology that's going into e-bikes is obviously developing quickly. I remember the first time I rode an e-bike and it weighed about 3,000 pounds, and it's coming down significantly. But talk for a moment, John, about both the R&D and how you've had to change Trek as it relates to having an electronic side versus just a human powered side. And then I did notice that, you know, your high-end electric bike, your Fuel EXE, retails for just about $14,000, $13,999.
Yeah.
So it is at a significantly, other than the very, very highest end road bikes for racing, it's a very high price point for most consumers. How has that been as it relates to people affording to get into that experience?
Yeah, so if you just take a look and you take a look at e-bikes, you know, you can get a really good Trek e-bike right around $2,000. So anybody can, well, you can get into e-biking, yeah. And, you know, there are financing programs available, but, you know, there are a lot of people who can take advantage of the e-bike revolution. If you take a look at mountain bikes, a new product we've come out with is a Fuel EXE. And if you look at that bike, you can't tell the difference between a regular bike and an e-bike. And that bike is amazing. And it won from one of the leading mountain bike magazines, Technology of the Year for the motor and the battery system. Another magazine gave it e-bike of the year. That's an amazing product. I think it starts around $6,500, and it does go up to $14,000. And you'd be amazed at how many bikes we sell above $10,000. People love bikes, and we make some incredible products here. So I would recommend to anybody who hasn't tried out an e-bike, go to a Trek store, try out an e-bike. It can change your life.
To your point, John, as it relates to, you sell a lot of bikes above $10,000. It's just funny. It worked perfectly with the little stat I had, which was when I went to your website and I sorted it by cost, and I had to go down through 19 different models before I got to a bike that was below $10,000. And so to you, I mean, you've got a lot of SKUs above $10,000 and that's, you know, it's really quite something. One of the questions I had on that is, my assumption in the automobile industry, and you talked about biking and automobile industry, is that as you move up in price, margins increase to the manufacturer, and that a BMW 7 Series, they make more margin over a BMW 3 Series. Is that similar in biking, or is it not?
You know, it was back to talking with my father again, but there's a difference between You can't take margin points to the bank. I mean, when you're selling those high-end bikes, I mean, the amount of gross profit dollars are really big. Margins might be similar. They might be, they might be a little higher on high-end bikes, but that's a big market. It's really big.
Yeah. And as it relates to what you're looking at as it relates to growth with e-bike versus pedal bikes, I'm going to swag it, if you had projected that your sales would grow at 6% on just normal bikes and you add e-bikes in there, does it double the growth of a company like Trek, or is it not that much of an add to overall sales so far?
No, if you take a look at a 10-year timeline at Trek, e-bikes have significantly impacted Trek's growth rate.
Yeah.
Because what you're seeing in the United States, let's say Europe is way ahead of the US in e-bike adoption. And so if you go to Europe, I mean, since 2010, especially in the Benelux and the German markets, e-bikes have been doing quite well, and they've been growing every year. And so some people think, the US, wow, this e-bike thing's amazing. Give it another 2 or 3 years, because in Europe, there's a lot of times where people thought we've reached the plateau of e-bikes, and it just keeps going. And I think the same thing will happen in the US.
Will you do me a favor? You were talking about the fact that you sort of can't tell the difference between an e-bike, that mountain bike, and a normal mountain bike. Will you put some type of big orange sticker on your e-bikes? Because I was going up Maroon Bells last summer with my friend Chris Davenport, and we're cranking out 270 watts and killing ourselves.
Yeah.
And along comes this man who's 65 years old, and he cruises past us, and my heart sinks as I'm sitting there going, oh no. And then Dav turns to me and he goes, no, he's on an e-bike. And I couldn't tell the difference between his bike and our bike. I was like, I didn't know it was an e-bike.
It's unbelievable. And there that guy is, and he's having the time of his life.
Boy, is he ever, particularly smoking the two of us. On that, just as it relates to the development on batteries, because batteries and battery technology is so being fueled by Tesla and the automotive market. How much crossover is there in battery technology development between the automobile industry and the bike industry? Or are the big suppliers on the bike side completely siloed off from the automobile manufacturers?
No, there's a lot of crossover. I mean, one of our big suppliers is Bosch, and they're a huge automotive supplier. So, you're seeing, all those people who are into bike batteries are into car batteries, and there's a huge cross-pollination.
Yeah. I mentioned previously, John, that Trek is a great place to work, and you have this amazing corporate culture. One of the things that you started a number of years ago was a big focus on wellness. And you were on the President's Council for Sport and Health under President Bush. I've heard you talk about the fact that, Health and Human Services sits there and tries to throw billions and billions of dollars at health and wellness in our country. And at Trek, you just got to a point where you just said a number of your coworkers had health events that you sort of said, I'm tired of having people not take care of themselves. And I thought one of the interesting things was that you gave people a certain amount of time to get into the program. And then you essentially said, if you're not going to commit to taking care of yourself, there's no reason I should pay for it. That sounded like a reasonably aggressive thing to say. And at the same time, your health outcomes have gotten better and better, and you've maintained a great culture of a great place to work. How have you pulled it off?
So I think people underestimate people. And people underestimate if you tell the story and there's something in it for people, they'll follow if it makes sense. And I was tired. And this was maybe 15 years ago. We had 3 employees who had serious health incidents. And a lot of it was because they were in bad health. All 3 of them were in horrible health. And so finally I told our HR chief, I said, dude, I'm done. I go, we got to change this formula because I don't want to go to any more funerals. And so we mapped out a program, and we said, we're going to turn this into, we're going to have a healthy workplace and we're going to create a healthy workforce. And we provide your health insurance. And if you don't care about your body, I'm not going to pay as much of your insurance. That's your choice. So he got everybody together and I gave this message, and there's like 800 people in the atrium. And I give this message and I say, listen, I gave the 3 stories and I said, we're not going to pay your full health care if you can't pass a health risk assessment, and you got to sign up for the health risk assessment. And this health risk assessment is like a mini physical.
Mhm.
And so before I gave this speech, we had provided the health risk assessment, and we had all the super fit people who would go to the optional health risk assessment because they wanted to know how low their body fat was, and everybody else stayed away from it. So then I said, listen, it's mandatory for everyone because I care about your health. I want you to be healthy. And unbelievable. And we said, we're going to give you a year to get into spec, and we're going to provide you a health coach if you need it. And we're going to have good food in the cafe, and we're going to do this, this, and this, but you need to play here. And we had people play all over the place. And we turned Trek into a healthy workplace. And over the last 10 years, our health rates have not gone up. Period. Who else can say that?
Right.
And so one of my things that frustrates me is, 42% of Americans are obese today. Their government is failing them. And we just keep doing it. And we have the highest health costs in the world times 2, and we get the worst health outcomes. If you live in Italy, you will live 8 years longer than if you live in the United States. It's embarrassing. And I can say at Trek, we did something about it. And, I'll tell you, we have a 20-year club dinner every year. And the number one compliment I get every time is, thank you for the health program. It not only changed my life, but it changed my family's life.
So talk for a second about how David McCullough changed your life and got you to write 2 books.
Well, I'm at my son's graduation, which I was thankful to be at because he was graduating. And David McCullough is the keynote, or he's the commencement speaker. And I love David McCullough, and great American historian. And at the end, he talked about the importance of reading. And he said, readers are leaders. You are what you read. And I'm like, right on. Because I'm a big reader. I love that. And all of a sudden, McCullough gets to the end, and he must have been 80 at the time, and he peers out over the audience, and he says, and at some point, do something for your country. And that really stuck with me. And so I was driving home that night, and I thought, what could I do for my country? And I have certain opinions about what I think the government should do in the United States. And I think we fail to address a lot of big issues like the health issue that we just talked about. So I wrote a book called 12 Simple Solutions to Save America. And that's how he's impacted my life.
And after you'd written that, and I know, as I said at the top, you and I think are similar in the fact that we're sort of both orphaned from being either a Democrat or Republican and trying to find something that addresses both sides of the aisle. Did writing something that obviously talked about political hotbed issues, just like us talking about wellness and 45% of the population being obese, did it impact you and your leadership at Trek, or impact the culture at Trek at all by you getting out there and stating your beliefs on those issues?
There's something that one of my favorite interviews, somebody interviewed Tim Cook, like on the 5th year anniversary of Steve Jobs' passing. And they said, what was the lesson of Steve's life? And Tim Cook didn't miss a beat. And he said, Steve believed that everybody lived their life in this box, in this small box, and they were capable of so much more. And at Trek, we had this saying, think bigger than the barn. Trek was started in a small barn, and it's become something bigger than that. And I think employees see that I think bigger than the barn, and I think they appreciate that. And I think, I think leaders and companies have an obligation when they see things that the country could be doing better. I think they have an obligation to speak up. I don't think, whether you're a leader of a company or not, I think, unfortunately, I think we've reached a low level in this country of people yelling at each other about tribalism and feelings as opposed to facts, ideas, and plans. And I think more sensible people, somebody once said this to me, David Kohler, who runs the Kohler Company, once said this. He goes, I read your book and I agree with everything in it. He goes, if you get a bunch of smart people in a room and you put all the facts up on the board, 90% of the time they'll come to the same conclusion. It's just the politicians who turn these things into political issues. I can go through any of these things, whether it's the environment, whether it's good government, whether it's the healthcare crisis, whether it's the legal system in this country. We've got big whopper issues that nobody's doing anything about. And if you put all the facts on the board and you put some smart people in the room, they'll solve them all.
I thought that was one of the things that was so interesting about both of your books, is just the fact that you focus on facts so much. So you bring in so much data to these issues, whether it be the length of the tax code or whether it be the amount that we spend on defense spending versus everyone else on the face of the planet, where you're putting these numbers forth that basically say, okay, here's the fact. Let's think about this rationally rather than just, oh, if we were to cut $1 out of defense spending, we're going to become weak. When you realize that we spend more than the next 7 countries combined on defense spending. And while clearly right now, China is truly becoming a threat as it relates to their military prowess and strength, it's hard to think that, continuing to outspend on defense spending, as you posit in your book, is going to get us at the end of the day better outcomes for our citizenry. But I find that focus on facts, John, to be so refreshing. And I quite honestly think it has obviously to do with your business career versus your political career.
Oh, yeah, I mean, it does. And, one of the things, I have 2 big whiteboards in my office. And, the way I start every meeting here is, what problem are we trying to solve, or what's the issue at hand? And I get up there with my little marker and I get everybody's opinion. Just, what do you think? And, there's a lot of smart people at Trek. There's a lot of smart people in this country. And if you focus on the facts, the answers become more obvious.
I'm looking over your shoulder on your whiteboard. It says, how much effort does it suck up? And then it goes capital, etc. So you're clearly living by that whiteboard over your shoulder.
Every day.
It's great. So as you think about Trek over the next 20 to 30 years, and the growth that you see either domestically or internationally, bikes into e-bikes, into any other types. I mean, does e-bikes get you into the scooter, moped, motorcycle business at some point?
I think there's, we love e-bikes and we love bicycles as a mobility solution. If you take a look at, the bike business over the next 10 or 20 years, I think there's some huge trends that favor the bike business. I think if you take a look at health, sooner or later, somebody's going to come to the conclusion that in order to improve health at a lower cost, people need to move. People need to walk, people need to ride their bicycle, and they need to, and governments need to help to make that happen. If you take a look at the environment, if you think we have an environmental problem, it's 10 times bigger than what you think it is. And we see that every year. It's just going to get worse and worse. and somebody's going to wake up and they're going to go, you know what? The bicycle is a simple partial solution for this. We need to get more people on bikes. And then you just take a look at the amount of people in cities and you take a look at congestion. So I look at those three mega trends and I go, I think the future for bikes is really strong. And then I take a look at Trek and I go, you know, when we take a look at our mission statement, when we were putting it together, we kind of went back to my father's original mission statement and we said, why was that so successful? And it was so successful because it was basically, we need to do these 3 or 4 things. And we said, what are the 3 things we really need to do at Trek? And number 1 was we need to build awesome products that we love, because we have a higher standard than the consumer does. If we really love it, it's going to make a huge difference. And then we said, well, we need to provide incredible hospitality to our customers. And that to me is the way you develop relationships and you build a brand over a long period of time. Is you have this great relationship with your customers, and can we do that? And then that third piece is can we change the world by getting more people on bikes? And at Trek, we're huge believers in the power of the bicycle. And there's a lot of tangible things we do. We don't just say it, we do it. And our ability to change the world by getting people on bikes, if we can do that stuff, I think the future's super bright.
So as you look out to the next couple months and you engage with your clients by doing the horrible hilly, the bike across Wisconsin, the tap to tour, what do you have coming up where you're going to be out there engaging with your clients and also biking with your wife?
Oh, well, horribly hilly will be on there. We'll do a couple of big rides in Europe. We ride 100 miles every Saturday. So that's my wife and I, that's our relationship building event. Is we'll ride every Saturday, starting in, mid-April or 1st of May, we'll do our 111 mile Saturday bike ride. So that's the one we always look forward to.
And is it just the 2 of you, or do you bring other people along, John?
No, we bring other people along. Yeah.
It's great.
No, we drag some other people along for that.
And I'm assuming you go over during the tour and go around and watch the races and have fun doing that as well, correct?
We go over there, we watch, we're usually there the last week. We watch some of the races, and then we usually watch the finish in Paris. Yeah.
It's great. I know your bike won Paris-Roubaix. I think it's the Madone won Paris-Roubaix this past year. So congratulations on having your bike be the chariot of choice on Paris-Roubaix. I have to say, I'm just a huge fan of what you've done with Trek. Our mutual friend Jim Cope is what put the 2 of us together. And so I'm extremely thankful to Cope for connecting the 2 of us. And hopefully the 2 of us can get out on a bike quite soon. I will tell you this though, I have to either you need to bring a Trek for me, or I'm gonna admit to you ahead of time that I don't actually have a Trek bike, and that you're gonna see some other brand when I show up. And it does remind me, once I was with Steve Jobs way back in 2003, before Apple had really gotten into the PC world, and he and his wife wanted to see a picture of our newborn son, and I had a Sony Vaio computer, and as I went to get my computer, I looked at Steve and said, I got to admit to you, I have a Sony, not an Apple. He said, just show me the pictures of your kid, dude, and be quiet.
Exactly.
So I have to admit to you at the time that I will show up without a Trek unless I go and rent one before coming to see you. Yeah, well, that means that you're a prospect. And exactly. We love all people who ride their bikes. And, there's a lot of happy Trek customers out there, and we hope to get you on a Trek someday. It's great. John, thanks for joining us. It was really a great discussion, and congrats on all you've done with Trek. Thanks everyone else for joining us today, and we'll see you again next week. Awesome. Thanks so much for having me. Take care. Thanks. All right.